A police officer threatened to kill the man's wife unless he revealed the fugitive's whereabouts. When he refused to speak, the officer coldly carried out his threat, murdering her in cold blood. The film begins in a city under heavy military control, just as a catastrophic virus outbreak unleashes chaos. As the infection spreads rapidly, turning ordinary citizens into desperate survivors, panic erupts. With danger closing in, most of the population is forced to escape, fleeing toward another city in a desperate bid to stay alive. Their attempt to flee the city is swiftly crushed as the military imposes a strict lockdown, forcing all residents to remain inside. Those who resist are arrested and sent to grim isolation camps. The next scene introduces Stone, a ruthless military commander, as he brutally tortures Susan, the wife of John, a soldier who defied orders. John had secretly aided residents in escaping from one of the camps, and when Stone uncovered the betrayal, he acted without hesitation. To extract the fugitive's location, he threatened to kill Susan if John didn't confess. When John refused to speak, Stone showed no mercy, executing Susan right before his eyes. 3 years have passed, but the horror of that moment still haunts John, etched into his every waking thought. Forced into hiding, he has spent those years honing his combat skills, fueled by a relentless thirst for revenge and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike back. Whispers persist that John once served in the Special Forces under Stone's command, a notorious unit responsible for a brutal massacre, slaughtering hundreds of innocent civilians on mere suspicion of carrying the deadly virus. In truth, the virus was nothing more than a fabricated excuse, an elaborate cover for Stone's sinister agenda driven by greed and a hunger for power. Innocent civilians were sacrificed, mere pawns in his ruthless pursuit of control. John, unable to stay silent in the face of such atrocities, bravely spoke out against his commander's brutality. But instead of justice, he was labeled a traitor. During routine testing, doctors discovered that John possessed natural immunity to the deadly virus. Seizing this rare opportunity, the medical team quickly developed a plan to create a vaccine using his blood, one that could save the entire city. But John refused to be used as a test subject, and he fought back with everything he had. After a brutal clash, he broke free from the detention camp and vanished into the depths of the forest. In the silence of the desolate wilderness, the memory of his wife's tragic death haunted his every step. The agony of loss weighed heavily on him, made worse by the guilt of the blood he had once spilled, innocent lives taken under orders he could no longer justify. Lost in sorrow and regret, John suddenly froze. There, lying motionless on the forest floor, was an injured woman, barely clinging to life. Without hesitation, John carried the wounded woman back to his secluded cabin, working through the night to stop the bleeding and treat her injuries. By morning, she stirred awake and introduced herself as Maria. While tending to her wound, John made a startling discovery: a bullet was still lodged deep in her flesh, a grim reminder of her desperate escape from the military. With steady hands and practiced precision, he carefully removed it. But as he examined it more closely, his expression hardened. This was no ordinary bullet. It was a high-tech tracking device. The moment John removed the bullet, Maria lost consciousness. As he cleaned and dressed the wound, something unusual caught his eye: a barcode tattooed on her wrist, unmistakable proof that she was being hunted by the Special Forces. When she finally awoke, John's voice was calm but firm. "You can rest here, but not for long. Once you're strong enough, you need to leave." He had no interest in getting dragged into more danger. He was already a marked man, a fugitive with the Special Forces on his trail. 2 days later, a Special Forces unit traced the GPS signal to John's remote cabin. They demanded to know Maria's location, but John stayed silent, his expression unreadable. As their patience wore thin, and they moved to search the cabin, John struck without warning, taking them down in a flash with lethal precision. At the same moment, Maria launched her own surprise assault, swiftly neutralizing one of the soldiers. As she watched John move with terrifying efficiency, a realization hit her: this was no ordinary man. Maria's curiosity about John grew, but he remained distant, offering no insights into his past. Meanwhile, news of the Special Forces soldiers' deaths spread quickly to their superiors, Roy and Lucy. Recognizing the severity of the situation, they wasted no time in reporting the incident to their commander Stone, the ruthless figure responsible for the murder of John's wife at the start of the film. Meanwhile, John poured all his energy into reinforcing their hideout, transforming it into an impenetrable fortress. He knew the Special Forces wouldn't let this go. They would come back for revenge. Late one night, as they sat by the fire, Maria finally confided in him. She revealed the reason she was being hunted. Like John, she carried the genetic trait that made her immune to the deadly virus. The Special Forces were after her, determined to capture her for their own dark and twisted agenda. Maria refused to offer her DNA, fully aware of the military's true agenda. Their plan wasn't to save everyone. The vaccine would be reserved for the powerful, while the infected poor would be left to perish. This wasn't a mission of mercy. It was a strategy to tighten their grip on the city. Fate had brought her to John, another rare individual with natural immunity. But there was one heartbreaking difference between them. John had been forced to watch his beloved wife brutally slaughtered before his eyes. Maria confessed that she had once been a thief and had spent time in prison. When the virus outbreak hit, it wiped out most of the inmates and guards, leaving her as the sole survivor not by chance, but because of her rare immunity. The following morning, John began training her in weapon handling for self-defense. He knew the inevitable battle was coming, and she needed to be ready to protect herself. Before long, the shadows of 3 Special Forces operatives emerged from the forest, silently making their way toward the hideout. John quickly sensed the enemy closing in. Without hesitation, he crafted a plan, stepping into the hut deliberately to draw them into his trap. As they neared, he struck fast, taking down 2 of them with deadly precision. But Maria wasn't so lucky. One of the remaining soldiers spotted her. He seized her, holding her hostage, and demanded that John come out. Using the cover of darkness inside the hut, John took careful aim and shot the soldier dead. Stepping into the open, he wasted no time and delivered a final, lethal shot to finish him off. When the 3 missing soldiers failed to return, their superiors swiftly deployed another team to track down Maria. However, doubts lingered. Was her protector really John? The former Special Forces operative once feared as a ruthless and skilled warrior. Meanwhile, John and Maria were ready. They knew the hunt wasn't over, and the next attack was only a matter of time. John retrieved a weapon he hadn't touched in years. The familiar weight in his hands reminded him that the real battle was about to begin. As he made his final preparations, he sent Maria to fetch water from a nearby lake. However, as soon as she arrived, she was ambushed. Special Forces operatives had surrounded her from every angle. Believing they had captured their most valuable target, Roy immediately tried to contact Stone. But before he could make the call, John emerged from the shadows, firing with deadly accuracy at each enemy. Once again, he saved Maria just in time. Unfortunately, Roy survived. He quickly reported everything to Stone and called for reinforcements. Realizing the importance of capturing Maria alive, Stone ordered his men to bring her in at any cost. Shortly after, a newly dispatched unit arrived. Maria was captured, but she refused to surrender without a fight. Seizing the moment, she launched a fierce counterattack, systematically taking down the entire Special Forces squad. When Stone heard of the catastrophic failure, his fury erupted. This time, he sent an even larger force with a single command: eliminate the one who helped Maria escape. Soon, a new wave of soldiers arrived at John's cabin, prepared for a brutal, no-holds-barred confrontation. Gunfire erupted in a violent storm as intense clashes erupted once again. But this time, John was ready. Not only had he devised a meticulous strategy, but he also used the terrain to his advantage, setting deadly traps for his enemies. In contrast, the Special Forces operatives struggled in the unfamiliar landscape, frantically trying to locate their target. Each step they took only led them deeper into John's carefully crafted traps. In the end, just as he anticipated, they met the same grim fate as their fallen comrades, taken down one by one with ruthless precision. Dozens of reinforcements arrived, intent on eliminating their target. While combing the area, they stumbled upon a hidden tunnel near John's cabin and immediately reported their discovery to Lucy. But before they could make a move, Maria, lying in wait, struck with lightning speed, taking them out one by one. When the gunfire finally stopped, not a single soldier was left standing. Word of the devastating defeat quickly reached Stone. Realizing his previous tactics had failed, he knew it was time for a change. This time, he would use the tunnel as bait, setting a trap to lure John into a deadly snare of his own making. While surveying the forest, John came face to face with Roy, an old friend turned bitter enemy. Without warning, the two engaged in a brutal clash. Roy proved to be a formidable opponent, launching relentless attacks that forced John to retreat repeatedly. Each time he was knocked down, it seemed impossible for him to rise again. Meanwhile, Maria was captured by the enemy. But John refused to stay down. Despite the overwhelming exhaustion, he gritted his teeth and pushed himself back to his feet. He knew he couldn't afford to lose Maria. No matter the cost, he had to find her. Meanwhile, Roy escorted Maria to the tunnel, where the soldiers were waiting for their orders. John, having taken down one of the enemy soldiers, overheard Stone's instructions through the soldier's communication device. Realizing the enemy was converging on the tunnel, he rushed there without hesitation. What John didn't know was that it was all part of a trap set by Stone. As he entered the tunnel, he was confronted by Roy once again. With no other option, the two of them plunged into a fierce, life-or-death battle. Meanwhile, Stone and his army lay in wait at the end of the tunnel, preparing an ambush for Roy and Maria. Back in the tunnel, John was gradually being overpowered by Roy's skilled attacks, but he refused to back down. He bided his time, waiting for the perfect moment to turn the tide. That moment finally came, and with a surge of determination, John countered and brought Roy down. Without wasting a second, he rescued Maria and led her toward the tunnel's exit. However, just as they neared freedom, they stumbled into a trap an enemy squad had positioned themselves, blocking their escape. Another brutal confrontation was about to unfold. With no other choice, John and Maria were forced to charge into the fight. Relying on their superior combat skills, they swiftly took down the Special Forces team. But just as they began to catch their breath, reinforcements arrived surrounding every possible escape route. Without missing a beat, John yanked the pin from a smoke grenade and hurled it into the center of the enemy formation. A dense fog erupted, blinding their vision. Seizing the moment, he grabbed Maria's hand and sprinted toward the exit. But just as they neared freedom, a bullet from Lucy's gun tore into John. He staggered, but through sheer will, he kept running. John and Maria rushed into a nearby room. He turned to her, his voice firm but calm, and told her to stay hidden no matter what until it was safe. He would draw the enemy away. Without a second thought, he stepped out into the tunnel, determined to lead the soldiers in the opposite direction. But the moment he emerged, John realized the truth. It was a trap. At the far end of the tunnel, Stone stood waiting, flanked by heavily armed troops. Surrounded with no escape, John slowly lowered his weapon, now face to face with the man who had taken everything from him. In that moment, Stone finally understood why capturing Maria had been nearly impossible. John had been protecting her all along. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing, and demanded to know her whereabouts. But John, battered and bloodied from relentless torture, said nothing. His silence was defiance. Frustrated by John's refusal to talk, Stone sneered only for John to lift his head and issue a challenge, a one-on-one fight. Provoked and eager to prove his dominance, Stone accepted without hesitation. In the end, John brought Stone to his knees, defeating him before the stunned eyes of his own soldiers. A heavy silence blanketed the battlefield, broken only by Stone's ragged breathing. Refusing to accept his downfall, Stone struggled to rise and demanded a weapon. But the soldiers remained motionless, their stares cold and resolute. Years of fear and obedience had given way to quiet rebellion. They were done following a tyrant. Furious, Stone lunged forward and ripped a gun from one of their hands. But the moment he pulled the trigger, the weapon backfired. The final trap had already been set. The bullet tore through his own body. At that moment, Maria emerged from the shadows, clutching 2 grenades, her expression fierce, her resolve unshakable. She threatened to detonate them unless Lucy let John go. Cornered, Lucy reluctantly complied. Maria was taken back to headquarters under heavy guard, while John was left behind in the bleak, silent forest. But what no one knew was that before they parted, John had secretly slipped Maria a vial of his blood, his final hope that a cure could be created and kept out of the hands of the merciless regime. In the end, the vaccine developed from John and Maria's blood brought hope back to the city, restoring peace to its people. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button to show your support. Be sure to watch the full movie so you don't miss any of the thrilling moments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on our next exciting videos.